Hello, lovely learners. Welcome back to ALifeLearned. So, I had recently gotten a request about how to handle your mental health and generally the overall mental health impacts of the COVID-19 situation and the coronavirus pandemic that we're all facing. So, I did a little searching on YouTube, and there's actually quite a bit there for anyone who's looking. So, if you just search something along the lines of the mental health impacts of COVID-19 or mental health impacts of coronavirus, you'll find a lot of stuff that talk about what could be happening, what is happening, and possible ways to cope. And as I was poking through, I noticed that most of it discussed, not entirely, but most of it discussed the impacts in terms of anxiety, because on a whole, this is like a worldwide traumatic event is what they're saying in one of the videos, and in that way a lot of people are at a point of high tension and high stress where even if they don't have mental health issues initially, we're all just in a point of trying to respond to this issue and trying to cope with the circumstances, which in any situation of trauma, when you're in the point of coping, um, your brain is very much focused just on kind of survival more than on the impacts that you're experiencing. It's kind of like a protective mechanism, shuts down other types of thoughts because they can overwhelm you. For some of us, less lucky ones, those thoughts don't shut down and we find ourselves in severe anxiety situations. And so if you do find yourself with severe symptoms where you're constantly ruminating on fears and worries, having physical symptoms of sweating and quick breathing or racing heart, these are reasons to obviously seek a professional and their advice and their help. And most offices are shut down, but apparently a lot of things have gone online. So do search out and Google resources if you think you're in need of help. And if it's severe enough, hospitals are still taking people. They obviously suggest that unless it's an emergency, not to go to the hospital right now, but that is a mental health emergency. It counts. So do keep that in mind. I myself have been struggling quite a bit, actually. I'm now on, I would say, the recovery. I'm doing much better. But through April and the end of March, basically after my school shut down and everything like started shutting down hard in Ontario and in Canada, I guess I took the social isolating thing a little too seriously. Like, I mean, if you recall from my last video about COVID, I was a little naive at first where I didn't quite understand the seriousness of it. Now I do, and I learned that rather quickly after making that vlog. And I also had a lot of school to still deal with that had all gone online. So I kind of bunkered down and tried to work, but immediately found myself falling into a very severe depression. It was bad. It was very, very unhealthy. I should have sought resources. Unfortunately, when I get like that, I don't respond well with like online stuff and phone stuff, and unfortunately that is a bit of a barrier for people like myself in this situation. The thing that was helpful to me, or the only thing that I felt was going to help me, was actual like contact with someone, being able to be around someone, which with the social isolation for most of us isn't really an option. I got very lucky though in that I had a friend living in the country who had been isolating for a couple weeks, hadn't shown any signs or symptoms, and neither had I. And so because my situation had become so severe, he came and lived with me for the month of April. And I won't even speculate how bad it could have gotten if he hadn't done that. Like it was getting very unhealthy, very bad. Lots of suicidal ideation, and so I can definitely empathize with anyone else who might be facing symptoms like that. It's really hard to deal with such symptoms of self-loathing and negative thoughts, and a lot of the difficult rumination that comes with CPTSD and other PTSD related conditions and trauma-related conditions, especially when it's, childhood trauma like with me. So situations like this have a special impact on people like us who already had mental health issues, but they're also having mental health impacts on just average everyday people. People who never dealt with mental health issues before, never dealt with depression or anxiety, are now dealing with symptoms they'd never faced, and are finding themselves confused and a bit lonely with it all, of course. And so if you're one of those people, I do really want to suggest, and I know this isn't easy, but the key is that social isolation doesn't mean emotional isolation. It doesn't mean psychological isolation. And that's the mistake I made initially, is I really kind of, because I wasn't being forced to interact with people through going to school every day, my lack of connection and interaction with people otherwise became very apparent and prominent in my notifications, in my routines. I didn't spend time staying connected or connecting with people too much. I felt very busy with school. And so not having the social feedback and just the refresher of getting out of my space regularly to go to school and interacting with people, literally just having to get on the bus, let alone having to go to school, it just made things a lot more intense for me. I already deal with a lot of difficult symptoms because of my PTSD, but it became so much more intense that I just crashed. And so I treated this and dealt with this through having a friend come here and getting that connection. And if you're not in that position to have someone who can just come and live with you, who hasn't been showing symptoms and has been isolating otherwise, then the key is to reach out in any other way you can. There are lots of people using Zoom, which I've never used, but I understand it's a good video site thing, and using Google Chat, using Facebook Chat, using another one I use is called Marco Polo. It's a nice app. Just Snapchat, whatever, just different ways to interact more and chat and still be social. Even though we can't be close to each other, we can still be emotionally close. And furthermore, we can actually use this as an opportunity to build emotional connections because we have time for it, in the sense that so many things are shut down, we're not allowed to go to work or school or etc. That's not to say that many of us aren't busy, but we do have a bit more extra time, and so it's really good to spend that time focusing on your mental health, because whether you are a mentally ill person or someone who has ever struggled with your mental health or not, you're definitely going to deal with something mental health related with this situation, because there's so much fear and stress in society in general, with the fear of catching the virus and people getting sick or passing away. There's a lot of stress with the grieving of people passing away, and then of course there's the extra impact of isolation and not being able to get that emotional feedback from human connection. We are a species who, no matter how much of an introvert you think you are, it's still part of your psyche to need human connection in some way. And so, yeah, my best suggestion is, if you have any current connections, try and strengthen them if you can. And for those who socially struggle, I can empathize with that. And my suggestion would then be, try to find something you can share with someone. I can definitely understand, how do you just start a conversation? I feel so awkward. You could try to find a book, a game, an activity, a craft, lots of different things that keep you busy that you could then start a conversation with someone else about. A lot of times, part of being in a relationship is kind of being selfish and talking about what's going on with you in your life. And after you've taken that opportunity to do that, you give someone else the open door for them to do it with you, right? So that's been suggestion number one on all the videos I've seen, and that's worked for me as well. I struggled quite a bit, but having my friend come here and spend time with me and be physically around me was huge. It was literally medicinal for the human connection. So tip number one, for sure. Again, if you're experiencing severe symptoms, though, don't belittle them. Don't pretend that they're not happening, because that's where we get into really scary situations of potential suicide, and we don't want to lose anybody more over this pandemic than we're already losing with the virus, of course. So do reach out for professional help online, on the phone, if you're having severe symptoms. Otherwise, though, it's important to keep up your mental health, to avoid finding yourselves in those situations. You can't just kind of pretend it'll all turn out okay. Like, it's like eating junk food and then pretending you won't gain weight. It's just not going to happen that way. And funny enough, the best way to maintain your mental health is to focus on maintaining your physical health. We all have limitations in that sense, but you can still go for walks, even though you can't be near people. You can still go outside. You just have to keep 6 feet from people. I've actually seen people like hanging out, having a beer, 6 feet apart. You know what I mean? So that's not outside of the possibility. It's just about maintaining that safe distance, and not, exchanging things or anything like that. And focusing on keeping physically active and physically healthy is just integral for mental health, because if you let your body atrophy, then your mind kind of follows right with it. And then another big factor that was suggested on a few videos that I watched was try to avoid having the easiness that it is to have your brain sucked away by staring at the internet all day, whether it be on your phone or on your computer, or on your TV, however you access the internet, or the news. Not to say don't keep yourself informed, but don't dwell on it, and don't mull away on your phone, on your computer. Try to spend some time looking at something that isn't an electronic, and enjoying an activity or doing something, even if it's just taking a breath and staring out the window for a few minutes, that isn't staring at a screen. And I know it's funny I'm saying this as you are staring at the screen to watch me, but a lot of us are going to be sitting watching a lot more TV, watching a lot more YouTube videos, watching a lot more of a lot of things out of boredom. And I can definitely respect struggling to deal with that boredom. Myself being a workaholic, I constantly feel like when I don't have chores to do or work to do, I'm bored. And so I can respect that. But there's options, The hardest thing to anything is starting, but if you can get that ball rolling, then, who knows, maybe you'll start a new craft, a new hobby, something that will be fulfilling, or at the very least good for you, like going for walks. To that regard, that's been my thing. Other than having my friend here, he's gone home now, that I'm doing better. He was very, very helpful, but just kind of the start of a healing process. Now it's keeping that up, right? So I'm now doing daily walks, keeping 6 feet from people, trying to bring a mask when necessary, but otherwise just trying to keep active, get into the sun, get fresh air, still see people, still see the outdoors, and keep the stimulus change going. Like with exercise and with scenery change, because if you constantly isolate in your space, and don't connect with people, excuse me, that's the perfect recipe for depression and anxiety, and the development of mental health issues, or at the very least worsening. So yeah, overall, it's about having to be proactive, and again, I respect that the hardest thing to anything is starting, but give yourself a bit of credit because you clicked on this video. And thank you very much for watching this far to that regard. If you'd like some apps, I know I said to stare at your phone less, but if you'd like some helpful apps, which can also give you further tips on dealing with your mental health, one that I learned about is called CBT-I Coach. I will put that down in the description, written out, so you guys can just copy and paste it into your phone if you want, or the app store. It's supposed to be completely free, and it gives you lots of advice on anxiety management and mental health tips on just keeping yourself well. and connected. And then another one, if you're an Instagrammer, is apparently the National Association of Mental Illness. I think that's what's called, NAMI. They have started an Instagram as a result of the COVID situation and the inability for people to access things in other ways. So feel free to follow them and check out some of the resources that they have there. They've made a particular effort to try and be more accessible to younger generations and to try and offer easy to understand and simple like GIFs and memes and stuff to explain basic tips on mental health management and wellness in general. So very much worth a look. And otherwise, if you have any questions, I'm not a professional, but I am in training for social work, and I'm always happy to share thoughts and just discuss the issue in general. So do feel free to share your thoughts below and share your experience with the isolation and the COVID-19 and how it's all impacting you and your family and your friends. And as always, do join me again sometime soon where I try again to share a little something I've learned and experienced in life.